makes no sense at all on any front. I mean, the fact that the U.S. and even Trump himself has said, yeah, we want to be the first in artificial intelligence. We want to be the first in chip manufacturing. We want to be first in the next generations of the internet. And all this blows up.
Imagine the flight out of New York had been delayed coming into India because 15 passengers had to get out because their employers called them and said, "Hey, don't go, don't leave the country." I mean, the flight was delayed for 3 hours and multiple such flights.
All right, let's now talk about the humongous impact this policy decision by the Trump administration is likely to have across the world, especially for millions of Indian students and professionals. Joining me on Global Pulse tonight is Scott M Faulkner. He's former first chief administrative officer with the U.S. House of Representatives, also an author, joining us live from Washington, D.C. We also have with us Dr. Srinath Sridharan, an author and strategic advisor. Namrata Mishra Pandey, founder and chief mentor at La Mentora, is also with us on the show. And a bit later, we're going to be joined by Ambassador Shashank, former Foreign Secretary of India. All right, Scott Faulkner, let me begin with you. Let's get the American perspective first. Do you think Donald Trump felt there was still scope left for him to torch the India-US relationship, and he therefore decided to bring about this change to the H-1B visa policy? Also, he seems to think he's making America great again, that this is America first. But many, including Americans today, are saying that he is not making America great again, or this is not even America first, he's going to leave America alone. What kind of reactions has this policy decision triggered, especially in corporate America?
Totally perplexed. It makes no sense at all on any front. I mean, the fact that the U.S. and even Trump himself has said, yeah, we want to be the first in artificial intelligence. We want to be the first in chip manufacturing. We want to be first in the next generations of the internet. And all this blows up. I mean, it is a totally ill-conceived policy, poorly implemented, and certainly chaotically communicated. It's just, everyone is just absolutely shaking their head. So I don't know. I mean, this whole America first, like you say, it becomes America alone. But actually, in many ways, the ripple effects is going to make America last. It's just makes no sense at all on any front.
Makes no sense at all on any front, but that's just Trump being Trump, I guess. Dr. Srinath Sridharan, let me come to you at this point. Of course, there's a lot that can be said about the massive chaos and confusion that was triggered by the Trump administration on Friday when they first made this announcement, because we all heard, the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, say that this was going to be an annual fee of $100,000. And a lot of American tech giants actually thought that this change may make it impossible for their employees who were already H-1B visa holders but outside of the US at the time to return to the country. And such was the panic, we saw people abandoning their plans back home here in India and making frantic attempts to get back to the United States within 24 hours. And then came the clarification the next day that this was not applicable to existing H-1B visas and renewals. It was only applicable for fresh H-1B visas. Be that as it may, how devastating a blow, in your view, is this latest decision by the Trump administration to India-US ties and to Indian students and professionals in particular?
Sure. Neha, I think I would look at it from two lenses. I think I would keep the students away from the H-1B specifically. Because if you look at even the last year's intake of Indian students going to the US, it has been reducing. And that's a challenge that the American universities will need to address at a larger play. But I mean, imagine the flight out of New York had been delayed coming into India because 15 passengers had to get out because their employers called them and said, "Hey, don't go, don't leave the country." I mean, the flight was delayed for 3 hours and multiple such flights. I think it kind of reeks almost like a very poorly executed HR policy that the super CEO told the HRA, "I want this diktat out," and it went out without realizing the contours of what that policy is going to mean and how would and what could be the consequences of those. And I think it took them about 24 hours to actually grasp what they had announced, including the mistakes and the clarifications that came in later. So the reality is, I think it shows the administration that when you take an executive order, mind you, that this still could be challenged in the court of law in the US, and many people are anticipating that. I think it shows very poorly on almost like super CEO, where almost nobody has control over that CEO. I mean, we call it the star CEO syndrome in the corporate world, and that's how it looks like. Institutionally, there is no framework to question or challenge, or anybody to even think through. Now, coming to the students, I think the reality is, why do students go anywhere? I mean, one is for greater sense of education quality and access to research at the higher level, but it is also for jobs. Let's not forget that. I mean, nobody goes there, spends let's say $500,000 in Indian rupees, and come back to India and work for a few lakhs, and that's not going to happen. So I think there is also that narrative of what we need to figure out. People migrate. US has been built the last 100 years on the back of very strong ability to attract global talent. I mean, it has been a magnet of global talent, so to speak, and that's how US grew in the last 100 years. And now, if they're going to rechange everything, it also assumes that they will be able to replace almost the equivalent of H-1B numbers with local talent, and that's, I think, the early conversations with American firms as well as Indian outsourcing companies don't seem to suggest that. I mean, if that had been the case, they would have anyway gone there in the first place.
All right, let me take this to Namrata Mishra Pandey. Namrata, goes without saying, I mean, you have to agree with Srinath on the point that he makes about how the manner in which the Trump administration went about it reflects extremely poor execution, and that's putting it charitably, given the kind of chaos and mayhem that they unleashed, causing so much panic amongst scores of Indians. But more than that, if we look at the larger picture, there are many who are currently on H-1B visas in the United States, and they say they are actually beginning to reconsider their decision to stay in the US. They say we don't know if we can continue to build our lives in this atmosphere of fear and uncertainty because the Trump administration, it seems, can pull the rug from under your feet any time. Therefore, do you believe that with this move, Trump has effectively rung the death knell for the great American dream? How do you look at this development and its consequences? Namrata, we can't hear you. Could you please unmute yourself?
Sorry. Um, See, I work with students who are applying for undergraduate studies to the UK, US, UK, all countries, and as well as the US. And I think at this time, I mean, and there are two sets of kids. They're undergraduate applicants and they're postgraduate applicants. And when Srinath was talking about the fall in recruitment and students going to the US, it's mainly the postgraduate students because they're going with the aim of only getting OPT, STEM OPT, and then finally an H-1B. The undergraduate market, for to say to some extent, is really not very affected too much. Of course, there is panic. Parents want to keep other options open. They want to know whether visas will be done, whether what will happen. There is a living in constant fear, definitely. Also, students who are already there, who are graduating this year or who have graduated next year, are wondering whether they should start looking for alternate options for jobs because there has been a lot of investment in terms of money that has gone in for that education. And, they want to really figure out whether they can stay on and or look for options in another country for a job or come back to India. Definitely, this has had an effect, but they're also waiting and watching. They're waiting to see when this is going to be withdrawn, frankly, because many of the policies have been retracted, some have been amended. There are things that have happened. So everyone is waiting and watching. That's about it. That's what they're saying at the moment.
All right, it is at the very least wait and watch for most people who are perhaps planning to go to the US to study and pursue their career. And for a lot of people, really, it's time for a rethink. Let me go back to Scott Faulkner at this point. Scott, you know, the Trump administration claims that H-1B visas were being abused to undercut American wages and outsource IT jobs. And as a result of this, American companies were laying off thousands of American workers to hire cheap foreign labor from countries such as India. Except this is not true, because these visas were being issued to high skilled labor in sectors where there was an acute shortage of resources, manpower, and talent in the American job market. But who's going to explain logic to Donald Trump and his administration? What would you say to those who are saying today that, you know, Donald Trump is delusional if he thinks that by doing this he's only hurting other countries, because he will end up hurting American companies and the American economy? This is the end of the American dream for a lot of Indians, perhaps. But, you know, this could also send the American economy into a downward spiral.
Well, the key is in all this is that someone doesn't just wake up one morning and say, I'm going to be an IT engineer. I'm going to work on AI. I'm going to work on the next generation of computer chips. You start around age 14 or 15, starting to take elective courses in different mathematics or science courses, or start taking computer labs. And so the pipeline, even if he cannot wave a wand and all of a sudden magically have American students and American 20 somethings all of a sudden be ready to take into these jobs. It's a pipeline. Plus, also, the last time there was a major surge in engineering and science interest in America was in the late 1950s when Sputnik went up and America was in a panic about the space race. And there was a huge surge of people wanting to get into aerospace, wanting to get into engineering. So there's a cultural aspect to this, there's a political aspect to this, in addition to the academic aspect of this. I don't think they thought any of this stuff through.